the circumstances. Deliverance of Muchukunda, Krishna running from the battlefield with Jarasandha chasing him for the 18th time after defeating him thoroughly 17 times, leaving him with nothing but his body. Even his chariot was gone. All his armies were gone, everything gone. Krishna went to Dwarka. Balaram married first Revati, then Krishna married Rukmini, and then we heard the son of Rukmini, Pradyumna, that story. And then we heard Krishna's marriage to Jambavati. Following that, Krishna's marriage to Satyabhama, the Shamataka jewel story. And now we're hearing this evening the next chapter, Krishna marries 5 princesses. And the little background, just to get us into the mood of Krishna's marrying 5 queens. Setting the scene. This scene is in Dwarka, and we spoke about Mathura and then Krishna going to Dwarka. What's that sound? Phone. That's your phone?
Somebody's phone.
Okay. But we didn't describe too much yet about Hastinapur. Hastinapur, the capital of the dynasty at the time. So there's this situation between the Pandavas, who are off in the forest, and the Kauravas, who wanted to control the kingdom, although it wasn't rightfully theirs. When the Pandavas returned on the advice of Vyas, that they should return after Pandu had died, they should return to the protection of the royal family. So they went from the forest where Pandu wanted to reside, and they came back to Hastinapur, with everyone knowing that the rightful heir to the throne is the firstborn son, who was Yudhisthira. And there was animosity, particularly from Duryodhana, because he was very ambitious. And worst of all, he just, he didn't like Bhima. So the poison cake situation happened, and then Yudhisthira was informed by Bhima everything that happened. He said, now is not the time for battle. Meanwhile, the next plan for killing all of them was Parochana and building a house of lac, and Vidura, knowing all of their plan, informing them that a tunnel should be built on the very day that they were to be killed. He knew, he informed them, go to the tunnel. On the other side of the tunnel, there was Vidura waiting with a boat to take them across the river. In the dead of night, Bhima, being so huge, he picked up everybody, including Kunti and his 4 brothers, and carried them some distance into the forest, where they all took rest. And while they were resting, you can see in the background, Hidimba, a Rakshasa, was thinking, breakfast, how fortunate. But he had a sister who was Hidimbi, and Hidimbi became very attracted to Bhima. And so she accepted a very nice looking form and proposed marriage to Bhima. But look over there on the far right side, Hidimba didn't like that at all. And so he came out and engaged in battle with Bhima, and guess who won? Hidimba lost. And when Hidimba was finished, Hidimbi came forward and made her marriage proposal. She made the marriage proposal directly to Kunti. And the caption at the bottom says, Hidimbi begged Kunti to be merciful and allow her to marry Bhima. And Kunti didn't object. Yudhisthira gave instructions in detail about the rules of marriage because she wasn't a normal person. She was a Rakshasi. And she accepted the principles of marriage according to civilized life. And in course of time, they were married. And in course of time, one son was born who became a very important person during the Kurukshetra battle and even before the Kurukshetra battle. Gatotkacha was their son. And although he was born of a Rakshasi mother, he was inclined to virtue, and he became a great favorite of the Pandavas, very devoted to serving them in so many ways, including during the Kurukshetra battle. So there they are in the forest, understanding that the Kauravas were thinking that they were dead. And so funeral arrangements were being made. They didn't reveal that they weren't dead. Krishna and Balaram came, you remember? Krishna and Balaram came for their funeral. And the Pandavas were advised by Vyas to remain incognito for some time, and that he would let them know when it was okay to come out of that incognito situation. He suggested that directed them, rather, to go to Ekachakra. The Ekachakra is well known in Gaudiya Vaishnavism because it's the place where Lord Nityananda was born. Up until the time Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took his birth, which was around 12 years, he left Ekachakra. But long before, in a previous yuga, the Pandavas were there, and they were in the disguise of Brahmanas. So they did what the Brahmanas do in Ekachakra. They went from door to door and performed Madhukari, and that's how they maintained themselves. And they stayed in the home of a Brahmana and Brahmani family with 2 small children. Very detailed scene described in Mahabharata of the Bakasura, different than the same Bakasura in Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes. Bakasura was a Rakshasa, and they made a pact with Bakasura that rather than raiding and invading and killing people on a regular basis once a month, we'll send a cart loaded with food, drawn by a horse, and driven by a person, and you can eat everything. What's in the cart, you can eat the horse, and you can eat the driver. And just leave us alone. And so they took turns sending the driver to be a sacrifice for the Baka demon. And while the Pandavas were there, the scene is depicting, it was the family where they were residing. In a very detailed description, each family member volunteering, let me sacrifice myself, no, let me sacrifice myself, and no one, they didn't want any one of the family members to be sacrificed. Kunti is overhearing all this conversation, and Kunti is feeling very sad. What great misfortune. And so she approached them And hearing the whole story, she volunteered, I have 5 sons, let me send one of my 5 sons. No, 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 you're our guest, we can't allow that. And she said, you don't understand my sons, especially the big one. And he'll be all right, everything will be fine. So reluctantly they agreed. Bhima took the cart, and he's a voracious eater, so while he was driving the cart, he was eating the cart load. And when Baka saw him eating, he was enraged, and he started fighting with Bhima, and Bhima continued eating with one hand and held him off with the other hand until he finished everything. And then he finished Bakasura. And if you visit Ekachakra sometime, you can find the carcass, the remains of Bakasura. He threw him in the air a long distance, came crashing down. There's a little shrine, there's a temple, and what they say is the remains of Bakasura. So after staying there for some time in Ekachakra, it was decided that they would leave Ekachakra and gradually make their way back to Hastinapur. And in the course of their travel on the roadway, they saw many kings and many brahmanas going for a big festival. Turns out it was the festival that was arranged by King Drupad for the Swayamvar of his daughter. What's her name? Draupadi, right? Draupadi? You're not sure? Draupadi. And the plan was such that King Drupad knew that the only person who could be victorious was Arjuna. So all the princes and kings and everybody, they tried their hand at gaining the victory challenge from Drupad, which was, as you see in the painting, painting, they had to look at a pond of water, and looking only at the reflection of the pond of the water, fire an arrow that went through a circular disc, and on the other side of the disc was a fish. They had to pierce the eye of the fish looking at the reflection in the water. So no one could do it, no one could do it, no one could do it. Karna volunteered. She said, no, because I'm the son of a king and you're a Shudra, so you can't become my husband. So he was very upset with her. He was in the get back mood for a long time for what happened. The 5 Brahmin brothers stepped forward. Drupad said, sure, if a Brahmin can marry my daughter. So Arjuna managed to perfect the art. By the way, Krishna was there too. Why was Krishna there? Because he had come to attend the funeral in Hastinapur, although they weren't dead. So he knew everything. We see Drupad in the background. We see Draupadi with a garland ready to garland Arjuna. We see some other kings in the background back there. And sure enough, Arjuna was successful. They were completely surprised. He was able to pierce the eye of this metal fish that was on the other side of a circular disc moving around. And Draupadi then gave the marriage garland to Arjuna. And so Arjuna started to leave the assembly with Draupadi, but of course the other Kshatriyas couldn't handle that. So they started a big battle. And this is Bhima with a trunk of a tree, and Arjuna with his bow and arrow, smashing and defeating everybody. And sure enough, they went back to where Kunti was, and when they were outside the house where Kunti was, they called out, "Mother, Arjuna has some victory, and he wants to have you see the victory that he has gained." So from the other side of the house, whatever it is, you share amongst yourselves. And share amongst yourselves one wife. So there's a big hubbub about what to do. Because our mother said, but how can 5 men marry one wife? You know the story. So there was a big discussion, and Vyasadeva solved the problem. Before she became the son of Drupad, she was a young girl who was undergoing austerities and wished to have a qualified husband. So Lord Shiva appeared and 5 times said, you'll be married. So because it's authorized by Lord Shiva, she can marry 5 men. So it was settled. The marriage took place. They remained for some time at the capital of Drupad, Kampilya. And after some time passed, Vidura came and recommended now is time to come back to Hastinapur. Because by now it was known. They weren't burned in the fire, the house of Lak. They were alive, and Arjuna is now married. All 5 of the brothers have married Draupadi, and there's now an alliance with King Drupad. So Vidura's recommendation was accepted. They all returned to Hastinapur, which later became known as Hastinapur. Later, the big discussion, Dhritarashtra finally agreed to divide the kingdom in 2. He gave them a forest, the Khandava forest. Later became Khandavaprastha. Later, after Krishna arranged for Vishwakarma, the architect, to build a nice capital for them, they settled in Khandavaprastha, then became known as Indraprastha. So while residing together, the 5 brothers with their new wife, there was an arrangement that each one of the brothers would be with Draupadi for 1 month, and the other brothers wouldn't intervene. So one time there was a problem. It's always a problem. The problem was some of the cows were being harassed by some dacoits. So the cows requested help, the cow herds requested help. So Arjuna went into the chamber where his bow and arrows were so he could stop the dacoits. And while he went inside, he was able to stop the dacoits, but it was where where Yudhisthira and Draupadi were. So he apologized profusely and said, I've broken our mother's word. I should go on pilgrimage for purification. Yudhisthira said, no. The higher principle is you're doing service to give protection. So there's no violation of your word. But he went on pilgrimage. And one of the places, many things happened. Many things. But one of the places he went to was Dwaraka. And when he went to Dwaraka, he developed a fascination for Subhadra. And by clever arrangements, Krishna understood Subhadra also had some attraction for him. Although the elder brother, Balaram, had a different idea. What was the different idea? Duryodhana. So a plan was made, plan was executed. Krishna whisked Subhadra away, and there was some fighting, and Krishna said, don't fight, let's bring him back and have him get married right here. It's very, very good. An alliance between the 2 dynasties. And anyways, there's details, so many details. Balaram consented. Although he's the elder brother, he would not go against something that Krishna wanted. So, Arjuna, now with another wife, Subhadra, Krishna decided to go with the 2 of them back to Khandavaprastha, which had now been very beautifully arranged by Vishwakarma at Krishna's direction. When Krishna returned, this is some detail, they were all very happy to see him. Been some time. And the sons of Pritha all stood up at once, like the senses responding to the return of life air, and the greetings, one greeting the other. The Lord bowed down at the feet of Yudhishthira and Bhima, because they were older, firmly embraced Arjuna, because he was of equal age, and accepted obeisances from the twin brothers Nakula and Sahadev. So just a cultural point is respect is shown to one another in proper ways in cultured society, and it's the fabric of relationships. When Kunti saw Krishna come, she was filled with love. She remembered the many troubles she and her sons had endured. She said, "My dear Krishna, our welfare was assured only when you remembered us, your relatives, and gave us your protection." Now, it goes way back to when Krishna was still 12 years old. When Krishna was 12 years old in Mathura, he sent a Kura to go to Hastinapur and check out what the tension was, because he heard the story, the Kauravas and the Pandavas. And the Kura came back unsuccessful, reported to Krishna what had happened. But this later Kunti says, when you sent a Kura, from that day I knew we're safe, we're under your protection, because you'll always look after the welfare of your devotees. So they had tribulations, but they had protection, Krishna's protection. Requested by the king, that's Yudhishthira, to stay with them, Krishna remained happily in Indraprastha during the months of the rainy season, giving joy to the eyes of the residents of the city of Indraprastha. While they were there together in Indraprastha, there's this reminiscing of how the forest became Indraprastha, besides Vishwakarma making so many nice buildings. So this is related in Mahabharata. One Brahmana, very odd-looking Brahmana with fire coming out of his head, that's Agni, on the back riding on this carrier, a ram, he appeared in a very different form. A Brahmana suddenly emerged from the woods. So this is Krishna, and Arjuna went for a walk in the forest with their bow and arrows and doing things that Kshatriyas would do when you go to the forest. They sat down on some benches. Arjuna said, "This has been arranged very nicely for us to come for, going for strolls in the forest." So they were sitting on a bench. A Brahmana suddenly emerged from the woods. He resembled an old sal tree with a complexion like molten gold. His beard and hair were bright yellow, and he shone like the morning sun. His two eyes were like lotus leaves, and his body was well formed and powerful. As the Brahmana approached Krishna and Arjuna, blazing like fire, they stood up and awaited his order. So they offered their respects to the Brahmana as is appropriate. One of the ways of showing respect is simply stand with folded hands when in the presence of a Brahmana or some personality. That was the gesture they offered. And what service can we do for you? You've come. What service can we do for you? He said, I was sent here by Lord Brahma to take your assistance. The Brahmana, I'm Agni, and due to extensive yagyas, I now have indigestion from too much ghee. And the way to get free from that indigestion is there's some herbs in this Khandava forest, and I would like to take those herbs to remove my illness. But the problem is every time I try to do that, then Indra pours down torrential rain. And so it inhibits my taking of the forest. So Brahma said I could be successful if I could take assistance from you two, Krishna and Arjuna. So when Indra comes, I start devouring the forest, and Indra comes, you have to hold off Indra. So Arjuna said, I can do that, but I'm going to need some paraphernalia. And he listed the paraphernalia that he needed. And Agni said, no problem, I'll provide it immediately. So Agni approached Varuna for a celestial bow. At this time, that's when Arjuna received Gandiva, plus 2 inexhaustible quivers of arrows, and a chariot belonging to Soma, the moon god. The chariot was golden, with golden harnesses and celestial horses from the realm of the Gandharvas, and could travel anywhere within the worlds. Above the chariot, Hanuman's flag. And the Gandiva bow appeared like a rainbow embedded with celestial gems. In addition, Varuna gave a gift to Krishna. The gift that he gave to Krishna was his club, named Kaumodaki. Interesting. Prabhupada gave that name to one of his female disciples, a BBT worker. She was very short, very thin. I don't know how she got the name Kaumodaki, but that was her name. And so they're all ready. So they gave the word to Agni, you go ahead and begin curing your disease, burning the Khandava forest is to your heart's content, and will give protection. So with the celestial chariot, sure enough, Indra came, and when Indra came, the arrows were so dense that Indra couldn't enter. And Indra appreciated it because Arjuna is his son, right? Arjuna is Indra's son? Yes? Okay, some people are saying, okay, she's confirming. So he was miffed, but he was also very proud of his son. As the situation was going on further and further, there's always a problem, right? So the problem was, the reason that Indra was trying to stop the devouring of the forest, because there was someone who he was trying to protect that was living in the forest. But at that particular time, the person he was trying to protect wasn't there. And so everything was all right, except at some point, escaping from the fire, came Mayadanava. He was also in the forest, hiding. There you see in the bottom left, that's the Khandava forest burning. And up in the sky, you see the many demigods and Indra riding his elephant, etc., etc. And Mayadanava, when he went running from the forest, he was being pursued by both Agni and Krishna's Sudarshan Chakra. So Mayadanava was very clever. He fell at the feet of Arjuna and begged Arjuna for protection. So Arjuna, very simple, he turned to Krishna, please withdraw your Sudarshan Chakra. That was it. He was relieved. And Mayadanava was very grateful for Arjuna's protection. So he petitioned Arjuna again and again to allow him to do some service for him. And Arjuna said, I don't give protection and then request something in return. That's not the Kshatriya's business. So thank you, but no thank you. He kept repeating. Finally, Krishna agreed. Instead, Krishna requested him to construct an assembly hall in Indraprastha for his brother, Yudhishthira. So he immediately agreed. He would have to gather all the ingredients. He knew where to get all the ingredients. Mayadanava gave a gift to Arjuna, his Devadatta from the Mainaka lake. He gave to Bhima a club of Vrishaparva, the king of the Danavas, equal to 100,000 ordinary clubs, because Bhima's a big guy, needs a big club. And Krishna made this request: build a splendid assembly hall for Yudhishthira. The like of this hall should not be found anywhere in the world. It should contain the features of celestial architecture and be impossible for anyone else to emulate. So it was agreed. And off he went to take care of all this work. And now it's time for Krishna, while the assembly hall is being built, Krishna to move on to the next stage of his pastime, because he came to Indraprastha on the occasion of Subhadra's marriage to Arjuna. Now it's time for Krishna to marry other queens. But what looked like a very dangerous situation with Agni, the fire, and Mayadanava, and so forth and so on, it ended up being something very wonderful. The celestial assembly hall for Yudhishthira. There was a good outcome. So Krishna is now ready to go back to Dwaraka, and again, here's Kunti speaking. Remember when Krishna came, now Krishna is leaving. My dear Keshava, you are the supreme soul of this universe. You are always kindly disposed toward everyone, but you especially protect your devotees. From the day that Akrura arrived in Hastinapur, I knew you were thinking of the welfare of myself and my sons. I am confident that whatever difficulties we may experience are arranged by Providence for the ultimate good. So Krishna is readying himself to return to Dwaraka. He had been residing in Dwaraka for some period of time. 3 queens had been married already. And now, waiting for the assembly hall to be built, he's going to marry 5 additional queens. That's setting the scene. Here's the illustration of the assembly hall. Pretty fantastic. Mayadanava's creation. And they're getting a tour of the assembly hall, which Mayadanava built. Now how many queens did Krishna have? 16,108. So the 8 are very special. There's already 3, and now we're going to hear about 5 more. 5 plus 3 is? 8, right? Okay. Just checking. The first queen that he married was Kalindi. And the occasion of his marrying Kalindi happened when he was still with Arjuna. Arjuna apparently accompanied him back to Dwaraka. Here's the description from this chapter from the 10th canto. Arjuna, the slayer of powerful enemies, donned his armor, mounted his chariot, flying the flag of Hanuman, took up his bow and his 2 inexhaustible quivers, and went to sport with Lord Krishna in a large forest filled with fierce animals. I don't see the flag of Hanuman in that painting, but it's there. After hunting the dangerous forest animals, the 2 friends bathed in the Yamuna and drank the river's clear water. The great warriors then saw an attractive young girl walking nearby. So Arjun speaks. Sent by his friend, Arjun approached the exceptional young woman who possessed beautiful hips, fine teeth, and a lovely face, and inquired from her as follows. Who are you, O fine-waisted lady? Whose daughter are you? And where do you come from? What are you doing here? I think you must be looking for a husband. Please explain everything, O beautiful one. And Kalindi replied, I am the daughter of the sun god. I desire to get as my husband the most excellent and munificent Lord Vishnu. And to that end, I am performing severe austerities. So Kalindi is one of the names of the river Jamuna. I am known as Kalindi, and I live in a mansion my father built for me within the water of the Yamuna. There I will stay until I meet Lord Achyuta. Well, Krishna was Lord Achyuta. The supremely auspicious Lord then married Kalindi and brought the greatest pleasure to his devotees. So that's one of 5, the marriage between Krishna and Kalindi. And the next is Krishna's marriage with Mithra Vinda. Let's hear a little bit about Mithra Vinda. Vindya and Anu Vindya, who shared the thrones of Avanti, were followers of Duryodhana's. When the time came for their sister, Mithra Vinda, to select her husband in the Swayamvar ceremony, they forbade her to choose Krishna, although she was attracted to him. So guess what? Lord Krishna forcibly took Princess Mithra Vinda, the daughter of his aunt Raja Devi, before the eyes of the rival kings. Now there's not a long description, but it's a nice painting. The Rakshasa or kidnapping style of marriage. So Kalindi and Mithra Vinda, 2 of the next 5 queens. Then came Nagnajiti. Nagnajiti was the daughter of Nagnajit, the various pious king of Koshala. So we know where Koshala is, right? Do you want to tell us where's Koshala? You're nodding your head, yes. Where's the kingdom of Janaka? Is the kingdom of Janaka the same as Koshala? Ah. So what part of India is that? Eastern part, right? Yeah. So he was the king of Koshala, very pious king, and he had a very lovely daughter. Her name was Satya, or Nagnajati, who was of marriageable age. The kings who came as suitors were not allowed to marry her unless they could subdue 7 sharp-horned bulls. These bulls were extremely vicious and uncontrollable, and they could not tolerate even the smell of warriors. So a bunch of princes and kings lost their lives because these bulls were fierce. These 7 bulls were impossible to tame, O hero. They have defeated many princes, breaking their limbs. So Krishna came to Koshala. When he heard of the princess who was to be won by the conqueror of the bulls, he went to the capital of Koshalya. The king of Koshala. Now wait a minute. Koshala is not the same place as Janaka's kingdom. Lal Gopal, I'm looking at you. The name of Janaka's kingdom is not Koshala, not Janak, because that's where his wife, Kaushalya, came from, the Koshala province. That's how she got the name Kaushalya. So my mistake. Huh?
Mother Kaushalya came from Kaushala.
Yeah. Yes. Kaushalya came from Koshala. That's how she got the name. Okay. King of Koshala welcomed Krishna appropriately by offering him a seat of honor and substantial gifts. Lord Krishna also greeted the king respectfully. When the king's daughter saw that most agreeable suitor arrive, she immediately desired to have him. She prayed, "May he become my husband. If I have kept my vows, may the sacred fire bring about the fulfillment of my hopes." Love at first sight, right? So what did Krishna do? He expanded himself into 7 Krishnas, tightened his clothing and expanded himself into 7 forms and easily subdued the bulls. Even one was there. So in the back of the painting, that's the king and his daughter. And here's another painting, Krishna fighting with the bulls. So after he defeated the bulls, he tied up the bulls, whose pride and strength were now broken, and pulled them with ropes, just as a child playfully pulls wooden toy bulls. Then King Nagnajit, pleased and astonished, presented his daughter to Lord Krishna. Conch shells, horns, and drums resounded along with vocal and instrumental music and the sound of brahmanas invoking blessings. The joyful men and women adorned themselves with fine clothing and garlands. So giving of gifts is part of Vedic culture, and the profuse giving of gifts is done naturally by kings, but also it's part of the culture and part of the ceremony when auspicious events occur. And we know from Bhagavad Gita, here's some reflections or thoughts. What is the principle behind charity? Why is it most important for householders? Bhagavad Gita gives the principles of charity according to the modes. So charity in the mode of goodness is to a fit recipient, a devotee of the Lord or a brahmana, fit recipients for charity. For householders, it's a duty because that's their duty. Amongst the varnas, amongst the ashrams, householders are the ones that have wealth, and they're to maintain others through their wealth. And holding on to that wealth and not giving in charity brings contamination of consciousness and problems when consciousness is contaminated. It's the principle behind charity is it's the mode of goodness. Different persons will be charitable in different ways according to their situation. The Brahmana's charitability is giving others the teachings of how to worship, and giving others the teachings of how to learn scriptures, and giving in charity in suitable ways otherwise. Dan pratigraha. The king of Koshala, his heart melting with affection, had the bride and groom seated on their chariot and then sent them on their way, surrounded by a great army. But here's a problem. When the intolerant kings who had been suitors heard what had happened, they tried to stop Lord Krishna on the road as he took his bride home. Arjuna drove back, all of them, just as a lion drives away all the animals. So Arjuna's not back in Hastinapur, he's with Krishna. They're dear associates. So that's 3. What are their names again? What's the first one? Kalindi. Second one? Mithra Vinda. Nagnajiti. Or Satya. Now, Bhadra. Bhadra was a princess. Here we go. I was ahead of myself. She was the princess of the Kaikeya kingdom. That's how I got, anyway. And the daughter of Lord Krishna's parental aunt, Shrutakirti. Parental aunt, Shrutakirti. Her name is not shown. The other day we showed that chart, the family tree. Her name is not there because she's one of many sisters. So the Lord married Bhadra when her brothers, headed by Santardana, offered her to him. That was pretty easy. No wrestling of 7 bulls or anything like that. And the final is Lakshmana. Then the Lord married Lakshmana, the daughter of the king of Madra. Krishna appeared alone at her Swayamvar ceremony and took her away, just as Garuda once stole the demigod's nectar. That was pretty quick too. So reflection number 3. Spiritual life is not static. Lots of adventure. It's dynamic, full of transcendental emotions. I mean, we narrated these very quickly, but to go through all these events, the people who reside in these places, really fantastic. And Srimad Bhagavatam has all of this excitement. So it was at this time when the hall, the assembly hall, was now finished by Mayadanava, and Krishna came again to Indraprastha. And it was at this time that Duryodhana was invited to see this nice place, and he fell in the lake thinking it was land. And the ladies started laughing. Duryodhana, Yudhishthira said, "Don't laugh." Krishna said, "Laugh." Why? He wanted to provoke Duryodhana, and it worked. He wanted Duryodhana to be eliminated. And one of the ways to eliminate somebody like that is they become irritated. And then they become, vulnerable for bad judgment and so many things. He was showing his colors. Krishna wanted that. So that's the chapter, Krishna marrying 5 more queens, and coming attractions is the 16,100. It was like a mass marriage. It was pretty exceptional. 16,100. But we'll hear about that. Well, I'll hear about it next place down the road. Okay, let's see if there's some. I don't know how you feel about all of this. Besides, the pastimes of Krishna are attractive. That's what this was saying. Dynamic, full of transcendental emotions, but transcendentally purifying. People like action stories. popular in movie production. They call it action story. It just means violence. But Krishna did all kinds of intense things. But he's the Supreme Person. And hearing about Krishna's activities is not the same as an action movie. It's not. It doesn't have the same effect. Just by like calling Krishna's name, or any way that one can immerse oneself in thought of Krishna. The kirtan, or his form, deity form, or these nice paintings, his qualities, his pastimes, his loving dealings, very attractive way of achieving his purposes in very, very clever, very intriguing ways. But he's the Supreme Person, and that there, besides, there's potencies invested just in hearing. As we heard that whole long description, hearing these pastimes of Krishna, like the Shamataka jewel story, one is purified, freed from all material contamination just by hearing, speaking, remembering, glorifying. Very, very special, transcendentally special. So let's see if we have discussion. You've got the microphone? Oh.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I had two questions. My first question was the Maya Danava in Krishna Lila, is he the same Maya Danava in Ram's Lila?
Same one.
Okay.
Same one.
And then the second...
That's my understanding, I should say. It's possible, it's certainly possible that because Danava simply indicates who his mother was. And Maya was his name. So from the category of Danavas, then it's possible there are two persons with the same name. But my understanding is the same person. He lived an extremely long life. There's that sound again. Maybe that's my phone. Let me see. No. No, it's not. Okay.
And Maharaj, my second question was, is there any description of like Satyabhama and Rukmini's reaction to Krishna marrying the other five queens? Because he moved on pretty fast.
Nothing that I'm aware of. They're certainly not envious. But I don't know. I don't recall reading any description saying how they were not envious. They're just not envious.
Satyabhama, I heard that she was envious of everybody.
She was what?
Satyabhama, whenever Krishna married a new girl, she was envious of everybody.
She was a what?
Envious. Like, she didn't like it.
She didn't like. Where'd you read that?
It was
A comic book?
Description of the... Yeah, some book only. Some other person have described it.
Finding the source of such statements is important, because I have learned, you have probably also learned, that to spice things up, some narrators just make up stories. I'll give you two examples. I was at some home, and I was describing what's in the Bhagavatam. When Maharaj Parikshit was seated by the side of the riverbank and Shukadev Goswami came. And the description that I gave and the image that I showed, right in the middle of speaking, a young boy said, no. I said, what do you mean no? He said, that's not what happened. It was like, firm. It was assertive. That's not what happened. So what happened? He said he was seated on a raised platform, tall in the air on a big pole. I said, oh, you saw the Sagar movie? He said, yes. You familiar? The Sagar series of describing Krishna's pastimes. Now, fortunately, Sagar, in a major way, he consulted ISKCON because he understood this is authoritative. But he just couldn't resist making something look attractive. So he put Maharaj Pariksit up on a tall pole and a big raised seat, and so the snake couldn't get him, but it was a snake bird, he could fly. Anyway. When someone grows up hearing such and such, then they think that's the way it is. And they hear something other than what they heard when they were little, no. So, be careful when you, there's many other examples, but be careful just accepting something unless you know what the source is. Now, it's certainly possible that there can be diversity in depictions of things because there are different days of Brahma and then therefore different appearances of the Lord, etc. There can be diversity, but we have to be very, very careful of the source.
Precise of knowing it.
Yeah. Be careful. I mean, for those of you brought up in India, it's kind of too late because you heard all kinds of things from all kinds of people and like yada, yada, yada. Yeah. What's authoritative anyways? So you kind of have to unlearn stuff. For me, it's easier. I didn't know anything about anything. And I just heard from Prabhupada. And then, over a period of time, there are different narrations, and then, it can be very selective about, okay, what's the source of this? Yeah? Someone else has the microphone. We'll come over to you. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So I have a question. Draupadi married Pandavas and it was because of the Lord Shiva's benediction
Yes.
to her. So is there any other internal reason?
Internal reason?
I mean,
Well, it's a
that.
pastime, obviously. The question was Dharma. We're followers of Dharma. Is this dharmic? Is this permitted according to Dharma for a woman to marry 5 men? Whoever heard of such a thing in the codes of Dharma? And Vyasadeva was called upon and explained something that supersedes the norm of Dharma was Lord Shiva said. So it's authorized, so it can proceed. Now, on what basis did Lord Shiva say? Well, Lord Shiva said, I want a qualified husband 5 times, so be it. That was it. Now, your question is there additional reason? Like a deeper or esoteric reason or something like that? That's your question?
Yes.
Kind of?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when the yes, kind of, the yes kind of is when there was the solar eclipse and the residents of Dwaraka and the residents of Hastinapur all went to Kurukshetra on the occasion of the solar eclipse. The queens were like really curious. Draupadi, how do you do it? Do you have some magic potions or do you put something special in their food and so like keeps them under your control or something like that. So how does a wife serve her husband? Where the husbands are all fully satisfied. So she said, no, not those things. He gets the opportunity to describe how to serve husbands, plural, 5 powerful kshatriyas. And where there's no enmity amongst them. There's no anything. So that's one reason, to give her a platform for speaking about. So of course it could be done some other way. And I'm trying to think if there's some other explanation about the layered interests of or reasons behind Draupadi marrying 5. Krishna's pastime.
Okay, and Krishna offering respect to Bhima and Yudhishthir. So I was able to connect with the day before yesterday class about acharyas. So how they teach by their act. So I was able to connect with it. Thank you so much.
You want to know, is this making a comment or asking a question?
Yeah, I'm just commenting.
Okay. We have several.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I was saying in connection with the previous question, like whether they felt a little bit, and like there's instance, Krishna gets Parijata tree for Satyabhama.
That happens later.
Yeah, but in that instance, I think first he gives flower to one of the queen. I think
He gave a flower to
Rukmini mother.
Rukmini, and Satyabhama wanted a tree. That's coming up. This is in connection with the 16,100 queens. It's in that same chapter.
No, I was saying like she felt competitive, like the previous question.
But that's she's left wing.
Yeah.
And Rukmini is right wing. But not envious, like, competitive. But her competitiveness is for the pleasure of Krishna. There's nothing else going on within her other than for the pleasure of Krishna. It's different. Go ahead.
Can I ask an online question?
Sure.
This is from Sham Gopika Mataji. She asks, if we give money to someone who is not in Krishna consciousness, who is in need of money for getting medical treatment, what mode is this charity in?
It depends. It's my standard answer. Depends. Commonly, it's not transcendental, and if it's mode of goodness, it depends. Depends on the person. It depends on how it gets applied. Here's on the one hand and on the other hand. So here's a very interesting story that appears in the life of Bhakti Siddhanta. During Bhakti Siddhanta, this is not specific to her question, but during Bhakti Siddhanta's lifetime, for a number of years, he took a group of devotees throughout Vrindavan to all the places of Krishna's pastimes during the full Kartik month. And one of the places they visited was Radhakund. And if you visited at Radhakund, you'll know around Radhakund there's elderly ladies sitting with their beads and chanting and a little bowl in front of them for accepting donations when people would like to give something. So the widows. And that's their way of maintaining themselves. They don't do madhukari, they just sit there and chant. So Bhaktisiddhanta chastised his wealthy business people from Delhi that were with him for not giving charity to these widows, saying, "Oh, you're thinking now that you're engaged in devotional service to Krishna, you are above engaged in karma kanda activity." But it's not karma kanda activity. Now, in this case, they're qualified because they're Vaishnavis and they're fully dedicating themselves to Krishna's service, and that's their means of maintenance. It's a humbling position. So that's an example where giving in charity is not specifically for someone in medical need, but someone in maintaining themselves. But on the other hand, Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta were not at all keen upon the philanthropy of opening schools and hospitals, where wealth goes simply for the welfare of the body. So if you have an opportunity for helping persons that are in financial need, and at the same time you're able to give them spiritual care, at the same time give spiritual care, then is something that you can consider, or you should consider. You can't give unlimited charity in unlimited ways to unlimited people. Our resources are limited, but it's something worthy of consideration. If at the same time one can give spiritual well-being along with the medical well-being. Here's an example. In 2010, not too many years ago, 12 years ago, I was chairman of the GBC. During that year, nobody gave me a job description. There's no here's what you're supposed to do as the chairman of the GBC. It was like, I was clueless. So I asked Ravinda Sarup Prabhu, what does chairman of the GBC mean? What are you supposed to do? And there's nothing in written form. And I thought of what he did when he's thinking of the welfare of the globe. Someone has to think like that. So during that particular year, there was one of those hurricane calamity things in the Caribbean islands. Which one was it? I can't remember.
Katrina?
Huh?
Hurricane Katrina?
But it was for which island? Haiti, I think. Haiti. So, okay, what do you do when you're in charge of a worldwide spiritual organization and there's this big calamity in someplace? What do you do? And then people started calling up and saying, can we volunteer? So what do I do? And I could say, throw my hands up in the air, say, duh, but I have to do something. So I found out that there's somebody that could help organize. So they were willing to be a contact person to send resources to help in Haiti. But they, make sure that the people that send or do want to go there and do some help, that there's spiritual well-being. So that was organized. And it was on my way to India, and I happened to pass through London Heathrow Airport, and I happened to run into about 15 guys that were all going to Haiti. And one knew how to build houses from nothing, and another knew how to restore crops that had been destroyed, and another one this and that. And they all had this plan that along with helping people, they had the whole, trunk load of japa beads and another trunk load of French books, because in Haiti they speak French. So when they went there, I got a report from them, what they were doing. And they were helping people. People were feeling very indebted because they were helping them put their lives back together. And they were having kirtan and showing them how to worship Krishna and how to chant on beads and how to learn Bhagavad Gita and so forth. They had a very, very dramatic spiritualizing impact on people. It was really good. So when people are in need, if there's some way that you can combine spiritual gift giving along with the care that everybody needs, it's worth considering. You can't do everything all the time, but that's something worth considering. Now, somebody else in the back had their hand up. No?
Anyone
Okay.
else?
Okay. You have another? Same?
The connection in the charity.
Okay. Charity.
Maharaj, the mode of charity normally also depends on the consciousness of the individual person, right? If he thinks he is giving
To get something.
yeah, he's giving to the another person who is part and parcel of Krishna, so he's giving to none other than Krishna himself. If he feels like that, then it will become transcendental, right?
No. Because that's quite notional. To see somebody is part and parcel of Krishna, so giving to somebody means giving to Krishna. It's quite notional. It's not consciousness. It's notional. In other words, does such a person actually live their life? That this person and that person, the other person, they're all Krishna? Or part and parcel of Krishna and therefore Krishna? Is that how they live their life?
If his consciousness is that level, like Bhakta Prahalad, he saw Krishna everywhere.
Okay, if we're speaking Bhakti Prahlad, that's fine. And if we're speaking, so-and-so Das or so-and-so, worldly person,
No.
notional, it's different.
Yeah.
So yes, it's dependent upon consciousness.
Yeah, that's
I'm just making the distinction. It's not dependent upon platitudes or words. It's dependent upon consciousness. If one sees like that, fine.
yeah. Thank you, Maharaj.
And then all the rest of your actions should be consistent. That's my point.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So I don't have a question, but just a couple of appreciations. So the first one is, last night you were speaking about how detrimental it is for us to react to situations,
Yeah.
and instead to respond, in the mode of goodness. And so I've just really been thinking on that, and I hope to really internalize that and carry
good.
that in my life. And the other thing is, all the years that I've seen you here visit St. Louis, it seems like every time you have these really nice paintings that I've never seen anywhere else, and every single time, every presentation. So that's part of my excitement of seeing your presentation is some of these paintings you find. So thank you very much for being here. And
Let me tell you a little story. I've said this many times. 53 years ago, I was a new bhakta. And when I was a new bhakta, I had moved into the Boston Temple. And when I was at the Boston Temple, there wasn't a BBT at that time. It was ISKCON Press. It was one entity, ISKCON Press. And ISKCON Press was in the same place, a single-family residence building. The place was packed. And one of the parts of the ISKCON Press was the art department. And the art department had the privilege of being, along with those who transcribed the lectures from Prabhupada's recordings, they heard them first. They would sit in a room, hear the recordings of Prabhupada dictating Krishna book or whatever, and then they would conceptualize the paintings they would make to illustrate Prabhupada's writings. And then there were three principal artists. The other artists were doing other things, but for the books, it was three principal artists. First was Bharadraj would make the drawings. Second was Jadharani would fill it in. And the third was assembly line. And Murlidhar did all the real fine, the jewels and the detail work. And they were the team that created Prabhupada's books. So we were told, don't disturb the artists. Well, I violated that rule. And I knew, to not disturb them, so I just went and sat. And they were happy to have somebody sitting and just listening. So as they're painting, filling in the paintings, they're narrating the story that they're illustrating. So I became addicted, not like fascinated, but addicted to visuals along with the narration. That seed is it's what started some years ago. Visuals help me understand and enter into the message. So it's been like that. No, I didn't gather all these. Many of them I did. Others also assisted. There's a primary person, Shatarupa, in Chicago, in Naperville suburbs. Does a lot of this. But then I do the rest. But it helps me, and I think it helps the audience to not only appreciate nice art, but to help assimilate the message and the story.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, please pass on that.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. My question is about purification. Before I came into Krishna conscious, I thought I was a very good person, nice person. I didn't have any faults or anything. I was going on with the flow. But when I got into this bhakti life, I felt like a lot of churning of the heart happened, that so many things surfaced. In the beginning, it was easy to clear up a lot of gross contamination or unwanted things. But as I'm going, I feel like the purification, I don't know if it's happening or not happening, but it's kind of a lot of subtle things are like subtle level of unwanted things, pride, envy, all those things. It's hard to actually clear up. And also in the beginning, I felt the life was kind of a little, with the bhakti added, it was dynamic, but sometimes I feel now static also. But Maharaj was mentioning bhakti life cannot be static. It's either upward or it's dynamic, I mean. So I'm just connecting those 2 points together, Guru Maharaj, the purification part and then the dynamic aspect of bhakti life and how to go about it, that, I don't want to ask like a faster way for purification, but in one sense, how do I know that purification is happening and then the chanting and hearing and all that, how do we know that we are actually getting purified?
Okay, you threw a lot of things up in the air, but this one that settled was, how do we know we're getting purified? Here's a very simple litmus test. I'll say it 2 ways. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's way is really simple. The mind going to objects with the contemplation of enjoying objects subsides, and the taste and attraction and eagerness for hearing increases. The spiritual side increases, the material side decreases. Simple. And the way that it works is there's a bit of a sine curve. It goes up for a while, then it goes down for a while, then it goes up for a while, then it goes down for a while. So it's a bit of a sine curve. So then you have to look at over a period of time. There can be a stretch of time when there's a lull, etc., etc. So you have to be observant, but that's the litmus test. There's a similar, slightly different, but similar passage in the 11th canto Bhagavatam that says there's 3 tests. Bhakti, Para Isha Anubhav, and Viraktir, Anyatrat. The third one's easy, detachment for other things. Then there's Para Isha Anubhav, your feelings for Para Isha are awakened. And Bhakti, you want to serve. You serve in a way that's pleasing and favorable. So that's the service activity, the attraction territory, and the detachment from other things. Those are standards. Right from the Bhagavatam. Okay?
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
I think that's it. Is that it? One more. You have any more online ones? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki. Oh!
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maybe my question, maybe I'm itself in confusion. Maybe I'll ask in confusion question. Might be.
As long as the question is clear, confusion is okay. Just be clear what your question is.
I'll try, Maharaj.
Okay.
Okay, Maharaj. Actually, this relishing and completing all this, maybe we have to reach in one level. But on the process, like we always feel like static or like.
Yeah, plateau is reached.
Yeah, so how to maintain that thing to reach there? Maybe I ask correctly, I don't know.
Yeah, I understand the question.
Maharaj, thank you.
There are different ways of answering. Here's one. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna states there are 4 reasons why pious people engage in his service. Correct? You're familiar with that passage in Bhagavad Gita? Chatur vidha bhajante mam jana sukritanorjana. Sukriti, persons who are pious, 4 types of pious people render service unto me. They want relief from distress. They want
They want some artha, like
they want wealth. They're needing some. They're impoverished. They need some financial, improvement. They're curious. Artarti. They want wealth. They're curious. Jigyasu.
and moksha.
Huh? No, that's just the 4th. He says is they want knowledge. So, supposing it's I want, or I want. Supposing those wants become partially filled. See you later, Krishna. Until the next round comes. Oh, I want. So complacency is easily occurs when things start to become a little more comfortable and they're less uncomfortable. You don't feel a pinch here and a hurt there and a pain there. It's like I'm fine. And complacency. So the slackening of submission is the consequence of having achieved some I want. So therefore, and responding to your question by saying, therefore you have to reevaluate, why am I taking up this process of serving Krishna? It's not like trash those other 4, but really there's a higher purpose. And one has to recognize, it's I call it spiritual work. You have to recognize that higher purpose and connect with that higher purpose. and you connect from a heart level, not just a circumstantial level. So that's the purification, or I call it Brahminical work. There's another purpose. Now, some people start with that in mind, along with the other things, and using Bhakti Vinod Thakur's language, it becomes cold. So how to keep it warm? You keep it in the fire, warm, by good association, and some clarity of what my mission and purpose of life is. When that inquisitiveness stays alive, then it doesn't become complacency. So it's good. It's a good training and it's a good practice to ask lots of why questions and keep refining them. Don't become complacent. Let it become hackneyed.
Yes, Maharaj. Keeping that enthusiasm. Like suppose if I wanted to say, suppose I'm meeting my mother after a long time, so I'm so excited to go there. Similarly, I wanted to meet Krishna, so I'm so excited. But as I cannot imagine that, so sometimes we are losing that enthusiasm. So the question is how to maintain. Of course, as you said, baby, the practice of
I understand your question.
Enthusiasm.
Well, if you like, I'll send to somebody Bhakti Vinod Thakur's detailed explanation of enthusiasm from Bhakti Loka, because it's of the 6 things that enhance bhakti, it's number 1. He concludes by saying, without enthusiasm, you can't progress. So your question is how to maintain enthusiasm. Well, knowing that that's essential, you stay after it with something that you want because it's important to you. If it's not important to you, you lose enthusiasm. You get distracted. It's like, anything. Like anything, you have to practice at something. Music teachers can teach you, but they'll say you got to practice. And when or martial arts or yoga or anything in life, you have to practice at it. And once you do it for a while, the novelty wears off, and then what? What's your purpose? And when there's a spiritual purpose, you stay with it. And there's not a spiritual purpose, you may do it for a while, but then it'll fade, because there isn't really a taste there. You maintain enthusiasm by recognizing there's value in where this activity is going to take me, the activity of knowing who I am. Like, curiosity. I want to know. Not just a superficial one, a deeper and deeper and deeper. Anybody that's practiced Krishna consciousness for a number of years knows exactly what you're talking about, because everyone experiences it. There's a kind of a lull. And that's a sign that we've lost our enthusiasm. And how do we restore that enthusiasm? It's a standard question. My answer is, you have to leave behind those 4 reasons, or leave them to the side, and connect with what the higher purpose of your existence is, the higher purpose of bhakti life is, the higher purpose of life, the mission of life. It's for thoughtful people. It's a profound question that usually people are too busy being successful to understand, to even ask that question. Because their sense of what's successful is over there. It's not in here. So it takes thoughtful. Manishinam is Prabhupada's phrase. Spiritual life is for people who are thoughtful. And if you're thoughtful, then the enthusiasm is there, because the purpose becomes increasing. Even if you know that you don't know, that's good. Better than being complacent.
So as in this practice, this always up and down. So once I feel very interesting.
But that's a sine curve thing, up and
So
down.
it's all.
It's completely standard. Completely standard. Now, when you notice that that's going on, how do you maintain enthusiasm? Especially when it's in the downswing, the complacency swing. You hit the reset button. Who am I? What's my purpose? And be in association with others that are similarly thoughtful. And when you need a tap on the shoulder, they're there. They're tapping you. Hey, you're falling asleep at the wheel. It's very dangerous. Better pay attention. Oh, and then you have a friend. Now, sometimes you do that with a friend and they go, what are you doing? Then, there's some boundaries that you've crossed. But anyway, why do we have this Sangha? Why did Prabhupada travel around the world and sacrifice everything to give that Sangha, to give the reminder when people have forgotten? So you connect with such people through sound, and your enthusiasm is restored. Let it slacken, your enthusiasm starts to fade. Or Bhakti Vinod Thakur says, it becomes cold. The enthusiasm becomes cold. And then things look dark again. Sound. Sangha. Okay, I think we're done. You have something?
I just want to say that on continuation of Mataji's thing, got a fortune to be in association with Maharaj for past 20 years. And so I derive the enthusiasm from Maharaj. So Maharaj is my inspiration. And whatever Maharaj has been going through these few days, it may be very theoretical for us because it's all related to Krishna, and which is 5,000 years back. But I just was, as Maharaj was telling all those things, I was just hearing and relating to the Maharaj way of dealings and qualities and so forth. So we don't need to look for 5,000 years back, Maharaj is embodiment of all this wonderful qualities. So I sincerely thank Maharaj for coming and patiently answering all types of different kinds of questions, patiently tolerating. So thank you, Maharaj, and we'll be eagerly waiting for your next visit. Please see if you can stay for much longer. Hare Krishna.